I've put the hot water on. I assume I can get this far to the water. Can I unhook that so I can make sure I can get over to the water when I need it? And I think the copy has been, one of the copies has been stolen over there, so we might have to get that back. The Sidamo is currently all the way over there, so I just need that to be able to. Okay, and this is nice and hot. Hold it there. Fill this. Are we going? Perfect, so I can start. No, we'll just do it. We'll make them around here when we start, or over here. So I want to make sure we had everything. Okay, shall we get started then? Cool. So, I'm going to start with a little bit about the Aeropress. I guess most of you probably know the history, but just in case you don't. Back in 1984, an American inventor named Alan Adler, created a fantastic invention that became world famous, and it won a Guinness World Record, and that was the aerobi frisbee, as you can see here. This kind of this sold massively worldwide, and kind of created a situation where he became a rich inventor, and he could spend all his time inventing things. We fast forward to the mid-90s, the aerobi having become the world record breaker for the furthest flying frisbee style thing in the world. This is not a frisbee, it's an aerobi ring. In 1995, he decided to tackle the issue of drinking good coffee at home. And by putting two copolymer cylinders together with a rubber valve in the middle, he created the Aeropress. So the idea of the Aeropress, when he invented it, was to be able to create a brew method that could quickly, using hand pressure and an air barrier, create something that resembled an espresso at home. Hence the numbers, which are printed on the front of the Aeropress. This is designed to be able to produce 4 espresso-style drinks. If we fast forward a few years to 2010, the Aeropress had really been taken on by the specialty coffee world. Not to make espresso, as it was originally invented, but to make a long black coffee drink. And I believe 2010 was the first World Aeropress Championships. So for the most part nowadays, within the specialty coffee world, and we assume for most of our customers, the Aeropress is not actually used as described in the instructions. What we actually do is use a much coarser grind than we would for espresso, or for the espresso style drink that the Aeropress is designed for. Something much closer to a filter grind, or slightly finer than a filter grind, to create a really nice total immersion brew. So that means we're keeping our coffee in contact with our water for the entire brew time, which is then filtered by a paper filter. We halt the brew process the second we want to, or exactly the time we want to, by forcing the water out, the coffee out, using the plunge. So what we end up with is a really, really super clean coffee, because we've filtered it through paper, but the balance of extraction that we'd expect from a total immersion brew, like a cafetiere. Obviously, with a cafetiere, we don't get the paper filter, the advantages of the paper filter. So I'm going to run you through today the inverted method, which is our preferred method, but there are a couple of other ways you can use it. The main advantage of the inverted method is this total immersion style brew. So what we're doing is, if we were to use the Aeropress as regularly stated, we'd be putting the Aeropress on top of a cup, If I brought a cup, that would have been useful. We're going to put the Aeropress on top of a cup with a paper filter in it, add our coffee and our hot water, and begin the brew process. But using this method, the coffee will immediately start to drop out of the bottom. What we want to do is hold all the coffee in, so we'll be inserting the top of the Aeropress into it, adding our coffee, adding our hot water, allowing the coffee to brew, creating a diffusion gradient within the coffee as we add the hot water, which will then begin to equalize as the brew continues and eventually reach kind of an equilibrium point. When we then put our paper filter on top and spin the whole thing over with a cup, we can then control exactly when all of the water leaves the Aeropress and force it through. Makes a big hissing noise, yeah? So, just give it a rinse, which we'll be doing. We just give them a rinse just before we start. So what we'll do is we'll just... Okay. Yeah. So what we do is, the reason for rinsing it is that you can get some paper fibers left over from the point where the paper is cut. And those paper fibers don't taste very good when they're in your cup. The most important reason for pre-wetting the filter is that when the filter initially comes in contact with liquid, it absorbs quite a substantial amount of that liquid, and the fibers expand, and that increases the resistance of the paper. But so if you don't do it and you try and push your Aeropress coffee through the dry filter, the paper will actually absorb the initial amount of coffee that's brewed, and it'll allow a small amount to rush through quickly. So what we want to do is to create the most consistent brew, make sure that the paper is pre-wet and also the fibers are all pre-expanded, so we have the optimal amount of resistance to the brew, and so that that paper doesn't absorb too much of the delicious coffee oil we want to end up in our cup. Okay? Cool. I'm going to ask one of the guys just to quickly grab us an Aeropress cup. That's the one with a nice round handle. And then we can begin. Water is holding nicely at about 94 degrees centigrade. Water is holding nicely at about 94 degrees centigrade. Whilst we're waiting for that, I will begin just to weigh out the dose of coffee we're going to use. You can use the scoop that comes with it. Maybe what we'll do is just find out how accurate the scoop is. I want to use about 17 grams of coffee, so I'm using a scale to pre-weigh my ground coffee. Pre-weigh. Pardon? We'll find out momentarily. Yeah. And whether you have it level or heaped or how you do it. So we can make some sort of consistency. The last thing I need is some coffee beans. Okay, so here's our beans. I'm going to weigh our coffee beans before we grind them to make sure I'm grinding the optimum amount of beans rather than grind too much and end up with ground coffee sitting around. So let's find out how accurate this scoop is. We use a level scoop there. We've actually got 18 grams there, so I'm going to remove a little bit. It's close, but we'd like to get it bang on just to make it perfect, a perfect brew. Yeah, I'd imagine if we were scooping ground there, we'd end up with even more, because there's less airspace between the ground. Okay, so there's our coffee. Now I'm going to put this through our grinder on a medium fine grind, which is how all of our coffee is shipped out if you opt to have your Aeropress coffee pre-ground. And now I'm gonna reweigh this just to make sure we haven't had any coffee caught in the grinder. With your grinders at home, you shouldn't have this problem. We've got 17 grams again, so everything is good. With a hand grinder, you can generally see if any beans have been left behind, but using a large grinder like we've got here, you can get a little bit of coffee getting trapped, and we don't want to lose any. So, now what's very important when we're using the inverted method is that we use this cone that comes with the Aeropress. So I have inserted, pardon? Is that the funnel? Yeah, that's the funnel that comes with it. So to start with, I've inserted the end of the Aeropress into the main cylinder, and I've inserted it to just about, you can see the black line of the plunger is in line with the top of the circle around the